What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson, and the preseason is finally over, which means that the Giants are about to begin their regular season in just 2 weeks, but before that, they need to trim down their roster from 90 to 53 total men. They have already started making a few of those cuts, so we're going to go ahead and dive into the cuts that they made and kind of discuss some of the other players that we think could be left off the final roster ahead of this upcoming regular season. But before we dive into all that, make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts on this topic down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. But without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And what are your thoughts on some of these cuts that were made today?
I'm doing good, man. And when you're looking at the cuts that are kind of underway right now, the morning started off pretty busy, my friends. I kind of expected it to be like maybe Monday, Tuesday, like things would kind of just get heavy. The Giants were not wasting any time. Right off the bat, James Robinson gets cut. You know, he had a really, really solid game last night, at a 28-yard scamper, carried bodies, evaded tacklers. He looked like he's an NFL player. But the Giants said, you know what, I think we're going to go in a different direction. They're probably going with Saquon Barkley. Matt Breida hasn't even played this preseason, so I imagine they kind of feel like he doesn't need the time. And then, of course, you have Eric Gray. So I think they probably go with 3 running backs, and then, you know, you have JaySean Corbin. He probably heads back to the practice squad. Like, running backs are a dime a dozen. I think if the Giants put JaySean Corbin on the practice squad, no one's going to pick him up. Like, there's so, like, if someone will probably go after James Robinson before JaySean Corbin, if we're being honest, because of the experience difference. And, you know, they can probably just stash him there if they need him. They call him up. It is what it is. But, you know, there's a lot of kind of new players and guys that a lot of them got injured. There was so many injuries yesterday, guys. I mean, we're talking about 7 players went down to injury. So a lot of them were guys that ultimately were vying for roster spots. And, you know, that's the unfortunate reality of that last preseason game. If you get hurt, you're pretty much done. Like, just for example, we're going to talk about Bryce Wheaton, tore his ACL. He's done for the year. Promising player. He was looking really, really solid as a gunner. The coaching staff really likes him. And now we're not going to be able to use him for the whole season. So someone else is going to have to step up. But what does that mean? It means that somebody else gets an opportunity. And if we're being honest, the guy that really benefits from Bryce Wheaton going down is Cole Beasley. Because right now I think Cole Beasley was on the fringe of the roster. And I think that now his chances of making the roster, especially because Colin Johnston was cut too, have skyrocketed. They're saying that he's going to be 100% healthy for week 1, so he'll be able to step in. You know, you don't really need much experience from him because he's got a decade's worth. You know, he's a proven asset, and then, you know, you can use him sparingly, whatever you want. The problem is, like, you really want those back-end receivers to offer you special teams value, and he doesn't offer you anything of that nature. So, you know, Anthony, when you're looking at Bryce Wheaton, how disappointed are you to see him going down? I know you're a big fan of his. And who do you think kind of benefits from that injury?
I think the Giants benefit from that injury because they were going to have to make a difficult decision on Bryce Wheaton, either keep him on the final roster and cut another player, like an established player. You know, you could think maybe Cole Beasley or Sterling Shepard or Jamison Crowder would be getting cut in place of Bryce Wheaton, but now they don't have to make that difficult decision because Bryce Wheaton, going on the injured reserve, he will be with the team next year. The main problem with cutting Bryce Wheaton prior to the injury was the fear of another team going ahead and signing him, right? You didn't want to see him really wind up in any other team. We know that the Eagles were interested in him after the draft. They called him. They were one of the 3 teams that it came down to for Bryce Wheaton. So my personal fear and nightmare was that the Giants were going to end up cutting this guy and he was going to end up in Philadelphia. But now we don't have to worry about that. So what the real benefit is to the situation, it's the fact that the Giants get to hold on to him at least for another season. So Bryce Wheaton, he has his full year. Go ahead, recover, get ready for next summer. And if he can go into next summer, have another good training camp and another good preseason, then maybe he'll be on the roster in 2024. So the Giants really do benefit from this. But Bryce Wheaton, it's tough to see him go down. However, we talked a lot this offseason about hoping to find that next Victor Cruz. We all remember Victor Cruz 2010. He was an undrafted free agent that the Giants signed. He went out in the preseason, looked really good, looked like he could sneak his way onto the final roster, and then he tore his ACL and missed the entire rookie season. So now Bryce Wheaton, similar story here. Signed as a UDFA, has a solid summer, tears his ACL, maybe he takes the season off and comes back and has that Victor Cruz season next year, because when Victor Cruz came back from that injury, he was a top 5 wide receiver in football, and he went on to help the New York Giants win a Super Bowl. So hopefully we could see something similar from Bryce Ford Wheaton. He takes this year off, he gets ready, recovers, maybe he works on his hands in the meantime. That's been a problem for him. That's a focal point. When we talked to Drew Lieberman, Alex, he mentioned that when Darius Slayton had a knee injury, he really just focused on working on those hands, fixing those hands up and ensuring that he was a better pass catcher. So maybe Bryce Ford Wheaton takes a similar approach, puts in a lot of work throughout this next year while he's recovering from this injury to improve his hands, which they are a weakness of his. I don't think he has the strongest hands. So I think that this is a benefit. It's kind of a win-win for both parties. Obviously, it's not a total win for Ford Wheaton. He's going to go through a long recovery process here. It's not fun. I wish him the best, absolutely. But this does give him an opportunity to make the roster next season. The Giants don't have to worry about him going elsewhere. So there are some positives and some silver linings to draw from this situation. But Alex, I will say, you mentioned James Robinson. Running backs really are a dime a dozen. We'll see where he winds up here. He's still a very talented player, but the guy that I like is JaySean Corbin. I think that he's looked really good this summer. The Giants gave him extended reps during practice on Wednesday. Brian Daboll wanted to see what they have in JaySean Corbin, and it seems like they have something. I think he might be the guy that makes the final roster in favor of James Robinson. So what are your thoughts on Corbin as we head into this regular season, and do you think that he is going to be the guy that sneaks his way onto the 53?
Look, if he does, it's him or Matt Breida. You know what I mean? Like, it's him or Matt Breida, and JaySean Corbin, solid player. He went 6 yards for 6 carries yesterday. Not very good. He was not very good yesterday objectively, but he was much better than the 2 games prior. So, like I said earlier, running backs are a dime a dozen. You can pick up a guy in the 7th round and suddenly he's running for 1,000 yards, like Isaiah Pacheco or Elijah Mitchell, 6th round pick. You know what I mean? Like, you find guys like this that are just capable. I think JaySean Corbin's also undrafted. So, you can find running backs that are all over the place. I'll ask you a question back to kind of get your opinion. Would you rather a player that has experience, understands, comes in a big moment, knows it's 3rd and 1, can get that extra yard, like knows the moments of the game, the intensity of the game, or maybe there's a couple seconds left, you needed to get out of bounds, and he has that veteran savvy, gets out of bounds, stops the clock. Are you going to risk it with a young player who's never played an NFL down and maybe have those lapses of judgment because he doesn't know sometimes? Like, you're caught up in the moment. Those are the kind of things, like, how much better is JaySean Corbin going to be than Matt Breida? I think we're going to see more Eric Gray than Breida or JaySean Corbin we would anyway. Like, Eric Gray is going to be the backup to Saquon Barkley predominantly. So, like, we're really talking about a non-factor for the most part. But, like, if we're going to talk about a non-factor, I'd rather have a guy that has experience. And, like, I think that's where my take kind of lands, is that, I don't want to, if there's a moment where we need Breida or Corbin to step up, who are you really going to trust, especially if it's in a big moment, Saquon gets hurt or something, knock on wood. I just can't wrap my head around, like, giving that ball to Corbin and being like, he's the better option. But that's not to say that he could develop into a fine player. I just get a little nervous, especially if you're going to your backups already. You want a guy that has some experience.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty valid counter argument to JaySean Corbin. However, I will say I would agree with you more if the Giants didn't have Saquon Barkley, right? Saquon Barkley being on this roster, that's the guy who's going to be in on those 3rd and 1s, those clutch moments, making the decision to go down and not go out of bounds. We saw Saquon do that last year, and it helped the Giants win a game. I believe it was against the Bears, but correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section. But that's Saquon Barkley. That's his job. If Saquon Barkley goes down with an injury, I think the Giants are going to have to bring in a new veteran. They're going to go into the free agency market and find somebody. That's what they did 2 years ago when Saquon Barkley got injured. Again, different regime here now, but I think that when you look at it from that perspective, if Saquon Barkley goes down, you can kind of just throw away this whole running back core. You're going to have to bring in a new guy regardless. So yeah, Matt Breida, he could be the guy that steps in and makes those veteran savvy plays, but also JaySean Corbin, maybe he's got really high football IQ and really good situational awareness. We don't know too much about this player, but Brian Daboll knows plenty. So if Brian Daboll wants to go with Corbin because he believes that he can make those smart decisions, then by all means, let's see Corbin make this roster. He's got some good tools. I like his running style. He runs pretty aggressive, pretty angry, and I think that he is a guy that maybe the Giants look at as a long-term developmental piece. Maybe no, right now he doesn't have all that veteran savvy experience, but they like his playing style and think that he could be a long-term backup running back for them who develops that savvy playing style. So I think that's something to keep in mind with Corbin. Young guy, still developing, but looks really good, or at least he has throughout this summer. Maybe not too great in last night's game, but a pretty good player that I think the Giants could have some value in long term. But another player, Alex, that did not make the roster that we got to talk about, and it's Collin Johnson. This one came as a little bit of a surprise to me. Not too shocking considering the injury history here. I think that's ultimately what doomed him and prevented him from making this final roster. The fact that Collin Johnson suffered another injury this summer, albeit not nearly as significant as the last two that he's had, but he did have another injury. He did miss more practice time, more time on the practice field, on the preseason field, and I think that ultimately impacted him and forced the Giants to make a difficult decision and go ahead and cut Collin Johnson. Now, the caveat here is, what are the Giants left with in terms of height at the wide receiver position? Because with Bryce Ford Wheaton going to the injured reserve, with Collin Johnson now cut, your tallest wide receivers are Darius Slayton and Isaiah Hodgins, and behind them, there is nobody taller. So the Giants don't have any height in that receiving core from a backup standpoint. What is the solution here, Alex? That's my question. Do you think that the Giants are going to have to hit the waiver wire and try to find themselves an outside wide receiver to play as a backup? Or do you think that they're just going to bank on all of that talent that they have with those shorter, inside-outside receivers like a Cole Beasley and a Sterling Shepard?
I think the answer is pretty clear cut. The answer is Darren Waller. The answer is Daniel Bellinger. The answer is Jalen Hyatt. The answer is Darius Slayton. Those are the guys that have size. You know what I mean? Those guys have some height to them. Waller's physical. Bellinger's physical. Slayton's has had some success making those contested catches. Hyatt's got. I mean, you saw him. If that throw by Tyrod Taylor wasn't an absolute freaking duck, he was going to the house. Like Sauce Gardner he was waving goodbye to say Sauce Gardner as he took off from the station. He burned the shit out of him. That type of speed. And look, Sauce is fast, man. You saw him last year catch up to some really fast receivers. Jalen Hyatt put him on the back burners, bro. He was in his wake. He was lagging behind. He was just grasping at straws back there, man. I mean, it looks, the best way to describe Jalen Hyatt's speed? It looks like he's gliding. You know what I mean? It looks like he's almost ice skating down the field. Like he's so smooth. He's moving without those strides that he has. They look so easy and so smooth. He just takes off. If you have a safety, and Slayton's, we haven't even seen Darius Slayton this preseason for the most part. If you have Darius Slayton and Jalen Hyatt, and you're playing a single high safety, you're running nines, bro. You're just hitting the nines on the outside. And wait, basically all Daniel Jones has to do is look over to one side of the football field, draw that safety in, and just sling it downfield as far as he could throw it down the other sideline, because one of those guys is going to be wide freaking open. So that's what I'm excited to see. If you're playing single, you can't play cover one against the Giants, because if you play man coverage, single high safety, you're going to get burned on one of those boundaries. You're going to see a lot of cover three, a lot of cover two against this Giants team, because you need to have protection on the back end. And what does that do for you? It opens up the intermediate and shorter portions of the field where, Anthony, you're kind of playing back into this, the smaller guys are going to operate. Wandale, Shep, if he makes this team, which we're going to talk about in a second here, Cole Beasley, if he makes this team, Paris Campbell, those type of guys, they're going to have so much space to work with. And when they get the football, they're going to look up, and there's going to be 4 defensive backs 10 yards downfield, because they have to now run in, because they have to cover those boundary routes, those go routes. You can't stop it. And then once they start mixing in those digs and crossing concepts, and those cornerbacks are dropping into coverage, and they're confused because they're trying to pass off Darius Slayton, pass off Jalen Hyatt, and then manage the Darren Waller running up the seam. There's too many weapons, to actually cover. It's gonna be a freaking dangerous situation for defenses to be in, because that speed, it kills. And in the NFL, speed kills. You look at the Chiefs, man. They don't have any big receivers. They are basically just, they had Tyreek Hill, then they had McCole Hardman. Now they got Sky Moore, a bunch of guys that are smaller. They don't need big receivers. They have Travis Kelce. That's their big guy. We got Darren Waller. That's our big guy, among a couple others. But I don't think Collin Johnson's height actually meant anything anymore to them. They're like, we don't need Collin Johnson. He's not reliable. And I think and I wanted Collin Johnson to pan out. I liked him. We really wanted to see him have a good preseason. And, unfortunately, injuries, if you're consistently injured, you don't really have much value, especially if you're injured now. You don't play that much. You're getting injured during preseason. Like, the only reason I think Sterling Shepard makes this team is because, one, he's the most experienced guy on this roster. One of them. Two, he's got some of the best chemistry with Daniel Jones. And three, he's a leader. And you don't get rid of leaders that are on veteran minimum contracts. That's my take. You don't get rid of like, he's basically a captain without the captain patch. You don't get rid of those guys on veteran minimum deals. That's my opinion. But what are your thoughts on that? Like, kind of what I said. Just I'm not really concerned about the size of this wide receiver core. I think we have plenty of talent to get the job done.
I'm not concerned about the size of the wide receiver core, but I think that there's something to be said about having a player in your starting lineup who is tall, and then if he's injured and out of the starting lineup, how do you replicate that? Because you don't necessarily want to just throw in another one of those short, kind of route running separator wide receivers. If your offense is calling for certain plays to have a player in there who has size and physicality, you need a backup to go in and replicate that size and physicality for any situation where that player might be injured. And that's kind of the main point that I was making. So yeah, the situation or the solution here, of course, is Darren Waller. He's a superstar. He's going to line up all over the place. Jalen Hyatt's speed is elite. We're going to see all of these things factor into this Giants offense. But if Isaiah Hodgins, who does use a lot of his physicality and his size to get open sometimes, if he is out of the lineup, who replicates his play? And that's just the question that I have. And I do think that it is good to have at least one backup on the roster with some height. The Giants don't have any right now, and I think that is something to be a little bit concerned about. However, you also make the good point. There's a lot of talent here. There are some sizable wide receivers. Darren Waller, Daniel Bellinger, these other guys, these tight ends as well. And the Giants do have an abundance of wide receiver talent right now. So is there really any room to go on the waiver wire and try to find another receiver? No, probably not. I don't think that they can make that move. But it is something that they might want to think about once we get to the regular season if we do suffer any injuries to the receiver position. If Slayton goes down, if Hodgins goes down, do I trust Sterling Shepard, Cole Beasley, Jamison Crowder, whoever makes this roster to step in and make some good plays? Absolutely I do. But at the same time, if it's during the regular season and we see one of those taller wide receivers go down, I think the Giants are going to have to go ahead and find someone in free agency or the waiver wire to replace that size in the lineup. It does do a lot for spacing on those plays, those crossing routes. That's one of the reasons that Hodgins is so successful, his height, his size. So if one of those players goes down with injury, I'm curious to see how the Giants exactly replicate it. But you are right in saying we have a lot of talent at the position, a lot of separators. They will be just fine with what they have going into this regular season. But it will be interesting to see who does get that final receiver spot. It is kind of a battle here between Shepard, between Crowder. I don't know if these guys are safe. Beasley as well. Looks like he's locked into a roster spot for what it's worth, but we'll see how that shapes out. But Alex, there was another player cut today that I think you're going to be a little bit excited about his release, and that's Corey Cunningham. No longer do we have to worry about the possibility of Corey Cunningham going out there and starting games for the New York Giants because he is no longer a member of the New York Giants. Really, if Andrew Thomas goes down with an injury at any point this season, I think our season is screwed regardless. I don't think there is any way to replace him in terms of the value and importance that he has in this offense, but it is nice to know that the Giants will not have Corey Cunningham trying to protect Daniel Jones' blind side because that would be absolute nightmare fuel. So, Alex, Corey Cunningham was cut. Who else was cut that you think is a notable release for the Giants here? And what are your thoughts really on this backup offensive line and the fact that they just don't have any talent whatsoever?
Yeah, I mean, look, I want to get one thing straight. I'm never happy that anyone gets cut. You know what I mean? Like, it sucks for them. Like, they get cut, and now they got to navigate this field. There's a lot of competition. Teams don't want them. They got to land on the practice squad and grind it out. It sucks. Like, I could see Corey Cunningham landing on the practice squad for the Giants. Like, that's probably what happens if we're being honest. So I feel for these guys. But I'll list off the guys that have been cut already, and I'll stop at any that actually stand out. Kevin Atkins, Darren Evans had a nice play yesterday. He was cut after the game. Donovan Jeter, we mentioned Colin Johnson, mentioned James Robinson, Tashawn Bauer. He was kind of a veteran, had a nice first game, and he's terminated. Brandon Bryant. Honestly, have never heard of him. He's terminated. Corey Cunningham, he's done. Julian Davenport, sucks to be Julian Davenport. He was signed like 2 days ago, already cut. Jaden Mickens had a good preseason, cut. Bryce Wheaton, obviously, to the injured reserve. So, you're looking at some players here that are mostly reserves, backups, like they were not going to make the roster anyway. Now, there are some other ones, like Jamon Green, undrafted guy out of Michigan. He could be cut. I really like Javarius Owens. Has been really solid. I think he makes the roster. He was a 7th-round draft pick. I think, most of our draft picks make the roster because they've been good. Like, our 6th, 7th-round picks, guys. I mean, I think half of our guys in the 6th and 7th round pick were better than some of our 1st-round picks under the Gettleman era. Maybe not the first round picks, but definitely the mid round picks. That 3rd to 5th round range, we're getting more value from our 6th and 7th rounders than the guys we got from the Gettleman era during that graveyard period, where we just couldn't get any value in the mid rounds. Aside from Julian Love, that was the one guy that actually provided some value. So when you're looking at this team right now, Chris Myrick, he got injured yesterday. Like, he has a hand injury. I think Lawrence Cager makes this team. They really like Lawrence Cager. He's a wide receiver transition tight end. Tommy Sweeney, I believe, he probably will get cut as well. So there's some room here for guys to make the roster. But, right now, it's mostly backups. They probably have some difficult decisions to make. Other cornerbacks I can see getting cut. Zion Gilbert, definitely think he's getting cut. Who else? There's some offensive. Honestly, I'm curious to see what they do with Shane Lemieux. Is Shane Lemieux going to get cut? He had a good game yesterday. Matt Parrott, I think he may get cut. He gave up 6 pressures and 2 sacks yesterday. But the thing is, the problem is, who are you going to pick up off the waiver wire that's going to know your system, that's going to be better than the crap, or the players that have been not so good for us during preseason? Are we going to be able to pick up anyone better than Matt Parrott on the waiver wire that another team cut? It's hard to say. Do you just keep him because he knows our offense? What is your thoughts there? I feel like there may not be that better options. They're backups for a reason.
Listen, like I said, the Giants don't have much talent at all on the offensive line outside of their starting lineup. So what do? I think they are going to be looking on the waiver wire for players on the offensive line. Whether they find the guy that they think could start games for them or not, I mean, that's pretty unlikely. But they're going to look for new talent. They're going to be scouting these next few days. Tuesday is the big cut day, 4 p.m. You're going to see a bunch of players get released, and they're going to be on the offensive line. And the Giants, what they have right now in their backup offensive line unit, it's not good enough. So they will absolutely go ahead, waive some of their own players to bring in some new guys from the waiver wire. I think that is a very, very likely situation. The Giants will be keeping a close eye on any offensive lineman that shakes free. Whether we think they're going to be impactful, a good player that we think can go out there and start games, again, not likely, but they're going to look for more bodies on the offensive line without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, I just can't see them going into this regular season with these players on this roster. They're not good enough if there are any injuries on the offensive line. So they'll be keeping a close eye on it. Another player, though, Alex, that I'm curious to get your take on here, Tommy DeVito. What do you think about him? Because honestly, what a preseason he had. He really did look great last night. He's looked good through the majority of the preseason. He stood out throughout training camp. And now there is a new rule in the NFL this upcoming season. You are allowed to have 3 active quarterbacks in a regular season game. In the past, you could only have 2 active, which is why we would see emergency quarterbacks, like with the San Francisco 49ers. When Brock Purdy got injured, then their backup got injured. Christian McCaffrey almost went in to play quarterback. This is something that we've seen in the past, but it's a pretty rare occurrence. However, it seems like the league is giving teams more leeway here in terms of holding quarterbacks on their roster. Do you think that the Giants might actually roll into this regular season with 3 quarterbacks? Now, again, I'm not sparking the Tommy DeVito versus Tyrod Taylor debate here, Alex, so don't bring that up, okay? I know Tyrod Taylor is QB2. He's locked into that spot. Of course, he's the backup quarterback. In my opinion, he's one of the best backup quarterbacks in the NFL. But Tommy DeVito, being a third-string quarterback, has looked good, and with this new rule in place, the Giants might want to hold a third quarterback on their roster just in case of any emergency situation, like the one that we saw against the Chicago Bears last year. When that happened, the Giants were in a real pickle. They were in a really bad spot. They had to go out there with Saquon Barkley running a Wildcat offense. That's not a situation that they want to find themselves in again. The solution would be to hold a third quarterback on the roster. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that Tommy DeVito has a chance of making the final 53?
I mean, Tyrod Taylor is just the bringer of bad luck sometimes. I mean, punctured lung, head first into a tackle. The guy just somehow just gravitates toward injury or weird stuff happening to him. So do I think we should keep Tommy DeVito around? Yeah, I do. I don't trust Tyrod Taylor to stay healthy for a game, let alone a quarter. So, here's the truth is that Tyrod Taylor knows the offense. He can get in there, stay calm, operate at a level that's competent. But if Daniel Jones goes down, we're screwed, guys. That's the case for every team in the NFL. If your starting quarterback goes down and you don't have a guy that has upside, or maybe he's a draft pick or whatever it might be, you're in for some trouble. Tommy DeVito, I like him for a couple reasons. 1, he's not afraid to take chances. 2, he runs the ball. He will take off. And 3, the kid's all effort. Like, he really wants to succeed, and you have to respect that. So I really like the idea of developing Tommy DeVito, giving him some chances to continue, taking the next steps forward. But he's not ready yet. Next year, though, sign me up. Sign me up for Tommy DeVito as our QB2. I'm fine with that. But right now, I think you have to keep Tyrod Taylor around just because he's experienced. With that being said, I'm fine keeping Tommy DeVito as a third quarterback just in case. But, I guess you don't have to sacrifice another roster spot if you don't want to. So maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. I don't see the harm in it.
I just see some fear, though, with Tommy DeVito having such a strong preseason. He could get cut and another team could scoop him up. And I think that's the last thing that the Giants are going to want to see, because they do have something here worth developing into a backup quarterback. So it's rare that teams hold 3 quarterbacks on their final 53-man roster. Usually you have to use that third spot and allocate it towards another high-volume position like corner, something in the defensive backfield, or even wide receiver. But the Giants here, they have something with Tommy DeVito. I don't think they're going to want to let him shake free. They might keep him on the 53 and hold 3 quarterbacks this year. Again, I don't know when the last time they did that was. It had to be several seasons ago. Of course, last year they went into the regular season with just Daniel Jones and Tyrod Taylor. They're likely to do that again, but in my opinion, I think it might be worth sacrificing another roster spot in order to hold Tommy DeVito on this roster. That's just my opinion. I think he's looked really good. And again, we've seen emergency situations where you need a third quarterback on your team. DeVito could totally step in and at least give you some quality snaps for the rest of a game while Daniel Jones and Tyrod Taylor recover, hopefully for the following week. So I like the idea of keeping Tommy DeVito on the roster. It's very rare that an NFL team does hold 3 quarterbacks, but I think with this new rule in place, it's something that we should see far more frequently, and that could be the benefit here for Tommy DeVito and ultimately getting DeVito dimes on this roster for the 2023 season. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Of course, we're going to continue to update you all on every cut that the New York Giants make, and again, with this cut day coming up here, we could see some more trades as well. So, of course, we'll update you on everything else, waiver wire claims, everything surrounding the New York Giants right here on Fireside Giants. So make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts on the topic down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. But without further ado, we will catch you all on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.